Hunter, what's your favorite color?
Favorite color? Some shade of green. Yeah.
Are you from the frog green or like a
No,
green?
probably more like a sage. It seems calming. We could all use more calming colors in our life these days.
Yeah, not red.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone to the Teamwrkr Podcast, where we explore the topics, news, events, and people influencing the modern world of work. Today, I am pleased to be here with Hunter Boyd. Hunter is the founder of Solopreneur Financial. He's a financial advisor, and in his capacity there at Solopreneur, he helps adventurous solopreneurs afford their bucket list life using specialized financial planning processes. He can be found at solopreneurfinancial.com, on LinkedIn at Hunter M. Boyd, and on Instagram at Solopreneur Financial. I'm sure we'll get all the socials and stuff together for everyone in the show notes here, and make sure it has all the links and all. So check for that. Welcome, Hunter, to the podcast.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate you having me. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it is going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And in preparing for it, I wanted to sort of just kick us off with a topic that might come a little bit out of left field for you. But tell me a little bit about growing up on an apple orchard.
It was definitely an interesting upbringing and childhood. One that I'm grateful for sure. It was, so I grew up in a family. My dad was a fifth generation apple grower. So this has been nothing new to the family on my dad's side, but they started, kind of doing the wholesale type business. So, thousands of acres of apples, shipping out just semi trucks every day to, Walmart's, Kroger's, Gerber, applesauce was a big customer of ours. And so that was the business for a very long time. It was a very simple business. But like all commodities, people don't really think about this. In kind of the 90s, the Apple market, if you want to call it that, started going downhill. And so, they kind of had to pivot a little bit. And what they did is, they went the agritourism route. So you that's kind of, if you think about like the typical fall weekend, you go out to the pumpkin patch, you do the corn maze, you pick some apples, maybe get some hot cider. That's basically what my parents created. So they sold a lot of the land, right, and the apple trees, and focused more on downsizing and doing more retail business. And so that's really the business that I grew up in and got to know really well. So there were a lot of different moving parts there, but it was an awesome experience. A lot of good lessons learned, and I'm grateful for that childhood that I had.
Fascinated by that. I mean, it sounds to me like sort of had a very cyclical, like almost seasonal approach every year, right? I mean, it must have been
extremely
harvesting, and all that, right? Weather
dependent.
dependent.
And so like with what I'm doing now, it's very similar, because a lot of the folks that I work with have seasonal type businesses, or at least variable income throughout the year. So I'm pretty familiar with that, and it was definitely one of those kind of feast or famine deals. And for the type of business that my family had, it a lot of it depended on the weather, right? So we made about 75% of our annual income within 6 weeks out of the year. The last 2 weeks of September, and then the 4 weeks of October. And you catch 2 or 3 rainy weekends, and that makes for a pretty bad year. So it's pretty scary, and you really have to watch kind of the cash flow, right? Because if you try to live like a king during the good months, you're going to starve during those slow winter months when the business is closed. So yeah, it was just some interesting dynamics.
Yeah. Take me from that to how you got involved with financial advisory services and that kind of work. It seems like, I guess it's not kind of related in some ways. I'm sure you're going to do that for me, but I'm also thinking, well, it's a little bit disconnected from. I picture you said thousands of acres of apples.
Yeah.
It's like that's a lot of trees and a staff of people, and then people harvesting them, and maybe seasonal workers, things like that. But how did you take it to getting involved in financial advising?
Right. I mean, I sit in an office most of the day, so that's a lot different my day to day looks a lot different than it did growing up, doing mostly manual work on an orchard.
Mm.
So, really what happened was I went to college. The plan was actually for me to continue the family business, right? To become the sixth generation. Um, Life happens. It throws curveballs at us all the time. And my parents were older, and my mom got diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 12 years ago. And so, a lot of different reasons like that. My dad was older, mom was sick. Um, I was not I wasn't ready to take over the business. I was 18 years old.
Mm.
So, it was kind of one of those hard choices that you have to make in, family and in business. And we decided to sell. So after that decision was made, I kind of changed gears a little bit and started, I was halfway through college, and um, I was an entrepreneurship major. So like this stuff has always been something interesting to me. But I just kind of switched paths a little bit. And I, just to kind of get a fresh reset and new perspective, I moved out to Colorado right after college. I mean, like 3 days after I walked across the stage, packed up a U-Haul and drove west. I'm in Kentucky, so it was a big move for me. And, I landed out there and I met a certified financial planner who, I'll admit, I didn't know what financial planning was when I moved out there, at least not to the extent of what I'm doing today and what he showed me. And so met this awesome financial planner. He worked with business owners. So I was naturally kind of drawn to him. And I was fortunate enough that he took me under his wing and he showed me what true financial planning is. And we were in an office where there were also like life insurance salesmen. And so I got to see both sides. I got to see kind of nothing wrong with life insurance, by the way, but those guys on one side of the office were just selling products, which is fine. There's a need for that. But what he was doing was very different. It was very, very truly comprehensive and holistic planning. He was looking at every aspect of these business owners' lives, and he was doing things that I didn't know, financial planners did as far as working with business owners. So he was really focused on exit planning, right? Helping business owners get to the point to sell their business and be able to harvest the wealth out of the business, which I think is missed by, frankly, a lot of business owners. And so, that's kind of a long-winded answer, but bringing it around here, that's why I got into it. I said, okay, I love this. You're helping people like my family, like my parents. And I realized, kind of with some of this knowledge that I had now, newfound knowledge, had I been able to start working with my parents 15 years ago to do some kind of proactive planning, um, I don't know. It's funny how life works, but I don't know that I would be doing what I am today. I probably would have been able to put together a plan to make it work for me to become the sixth generation. It's just funny how life works sometimes. But, my goal was, when I set off into the business, is like, hey, I want to be the guy that my parents wish had come along 15 years ago. It's kind of my motto from day one, and it still is. And so that's kind of if you ask me my why, that's my why, is to be the advisor that my parents wish had come along 15 years ago. Because knowing what I know now, had I started working with them, their financial situation would look very different today. So.
It's funny how you use the word harvest when you talked about.
Yeah, not intended. But I like it.
Yeah, sorry, it worked out. Yeah. One of the topics that you brought up there was sort of planning as an entrepreneur, and today maybe we'll talk a little about the changing world of work here. A lot of folks listening to this podcast are either freelancers or we might call solopreneurs. Some of them, some are entrepreneurial, certainly entrepreneurial by nature. I mean, this is what they do. They're not really working a 9-to-5 type of job or a traditional career path. And so, one of the things that I think about in my own experience, and so you just mentioned, is how you go about planning, your financial life. Of course, so important to have that aspect kind of thought through so you can live the rest of your life, right? But for people who are out there today, and maybe we'll just draw some distinctions a little bit here. Talk about what you think as maybe a freelancer versus a solopreneur. Are there some slight distinctions there? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, so I think we're still kind of in the wild, wild west of this whole, not definitely not necessarily gig economy, but I think COVID really we saw a big change, and we're going to continue to see that even more in the next few years. Is a lot of people are leaving the corporate 9 to 5 and going out on their own, and I love to see it. But I think you're right. I think there are some distinctions between what is, the labels basically, right? Like, what do you call yourself? Are you a solopreneur, a freelancer, just an independent contractor, which is technically all of them. But in my mind, I think a solopreneur is someone who it's a single person business right now, keyword right now, but maybe they don't intend to bring more employees, but they intend to grow the business that they're creating into into something beyond themselves, right? So uh, maybe an example would be a web designer, right? They just left the 9 to 5. They're a one-person business. Maybe they outsource some admin work or something to a virtual assistant. They're 1099, so they're technically still a solopreneur, right? Still a one-person business. But maybe this solopreneur has bigger plans to, you know, grow a team around them, or just build some sort of enterprise value, which we can get into here in a minute. But in my mind, a solopreneur wants to build a business and potentially sell it one day, or at least build it beyond themselves. Compare that to a freelancer. In my mind, I'm not pulling this from Webster Dictionary, but in my mind, a freelancer is also a one person business, but they have zero intentions on building something beyond themselves. They are very happy being a photographer, and they don't necessarily care to open a gallery and hire employees, or try to build enterprise value, try to build a business that they can sell. They're happy with providing the skill and the service that they are good at, and that's it. And the planning work that I do would look a little bit different for a solopreneur versus a freelancer long term over the course of a relationship. But in my mind, that's kind of the distinction that I put on the two.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think you really interesting comment about it's the wild, wild west out there. I mean, certainly COVID moved forward, I think, or moved faster this change in the workspace that we're all feeling maybe even 5 years ago, or maybe a little longer. But the one of the things you brought up there was this concept of enterprise value. Can you kind of expand that for me a little bit? What do you mean by that? And what's the upshot from that?
Yeah, so enterprise value is really just kind of the industry jargon name for the value of your business, right? Um, so you have at a with bigger businesses, you might hire a mergers and acquisition advisor, right? And there's a ton of different ways. I think people don't realize this. There are a ton of different ways to value a business. There's not just a one way to value a business. And a lot of people don't realize that businesses do have like intrinsic value, like beyond the desk and chairs. A lot of people think, oh, the value of my business is the physical tangible assets, which isn't the case at all. I mean, like for a photographer, for instance, that person might think, oh, my camera, that's, if I sell my business, I'm selling my camera. No, that's actually not the case. You have a brand that's called, when you go to value a business, it's considered goodwill. That's the category that you put that under. There's all sorts, cash flow. People buy businesses strictly for the cash flow. And so there's probably, off the top of my head, I could think of 7 or 8 different ways to value a small business. So enterprise value is just that. It's the value of the business. And that's something that I focus pretty heavily on with clients, is growing the value of the business. And not only just growing the value, but how do you transfer it, right? Because in order to harvest the wealth out of the business, you have to be able to sell it. And I think a big mistake that people make is thinking a profitable business is a sellable one. You can have a very profitable business and nobody want to buy it for certain reasons. So
Hmm.
it's a crazy world, but it's one that I think gets overlooked, and I'm really hoping to change that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's great. You kind of some of the examples you use around photographers or other creative people. Lots of the folks we encounter in this either freelance or solopreneur space are just of those types. I think that that's an important message to sort of get out there, that whether it's your brand or some other elements in your business, you can really build a lot of value that one day maybe you can sell to another company, or certainly you continue to grow your business and improve upon just that core value of it. You talked a minute ago about maybe planning for a solopreneur versus a freelancer, and tell me a little about that. Especially, I've noticed a lot of people who've made real decisions to leave the corporate world, right? I mean, some years ago, if you said you go freelance, you're probably talking about someone who was maybe looking to make a temporary kind of lifestyle change. Maybe they were looking to take care of children, or maybe they were taking care of an elderly parent, someone like that, and they were going to return to the workforce, return to the 9 to 5 kind of day. And today, I would say, oh gosh, 90+% of the people I talk to in the work that I do, they're not returning.
Yeah.
And it's just no, that's not going to happen. I think that's part of the fascination I have, certainly with the world of work today. Tell me a little about now, and I don't think that I want to go back to it a little bit. We're talking about freelance versus solopreneur, and I think there's a lot of distinctions. I don't think one is better than another. You
Definitely
can
not.
decide, right? So it's, we were talking about this before. So what about kind of a little bit, kind of maybe give us a little thumbnail sketch of how you might plan differently for someone who's a pure freelancer who says, I just really love what I do. I left the corporate world because I love this, and I'm going to devote my time to doing this, versus someone who says, geez, I'm thinking about, I'm going to put a couple categories, little couple categories here for you. One is, I'm thinking about developing my own studio or my own bigger business over here, whether it's a photographer or maybe a marketing professional. Maybe I'm going to develop my own agency,
Yep.
and I'm really not sure about that, because where does that go, and all that. There's a lot of thought process around that. Just who would help me to do this, and who would I hire, and all that stuff. But even like the financial planning around that, right? And so, tell me a little about maybe first how you might explore and talk to someone who says, I'm just really a freelancer. I love what I do. I want to be me and do this, versus someone who says, well, I might want to grow this a little bit bigger and do something different. Tell me about some of the distinctions there for you in planning.
Yeah, off the top of my head. So, like I mentioned, that solopreneur in my mind wants to build something beyond themselves. So if that's the case, then we are going to always consider, we're always going to have the exit in mind as we plan, right? Tax planning is a big part of that, coordinating how you're growing the value of your business while minimizing taxes, not just at the time of sale, but leading up to it, right? While you're building the value of your business. So exit planning would be an emphasis on the solopreneur. Whereas, with the freelancer, they don't plan on selling anything. They're really just operating a lifestyle business. Again, nothing wrong with that. That's just, if that's the choice they make. We're probably not going to focus on the exit planning too much. That being said, investing does look very different for a solopreneur versus a freelancer. Not necessarily as much the type of investments, but the types of accounts and the amounts that we're contributing, right? The savings rate. And what I mean by that is a solopreneur, right? In my opinion, a well-run small business that you can sell is the greatest wealth creation tool that we have available to us as Americans. So with that being the case, and that's on an after-tax basis, because it's all about what you keep. It's not about what you make, it's about what you keep. And so businesses just have more tax planning opportunities, right? The IRS, the government says, hey, we are wanting to incentivize people to do certain things. So one of the things that, one of the tools we're going to use to incentivize people are tax deductions and tax credits. And the government loves to see entrepreneurship and innovation because that stimulates the economy. Stimulated economy means more tax revenue. So it all kind of goes full circle, but businesses, solopreneurs, have way more tax planning opportunities. So we're plugging in a lot of times money back into the business, right? So dollars that stay in a business are maybe not sheltered, but aren't taxed as high as dollars that you then move from the business into your personal accounts. So for the solopreneur, we might be investing most of the profits back into the business or keeping those profits in the business to grow the enterprise value, because that's really where you're going to get the most wealth from a wealth accumulation standpoint. Whereas a freelancer, if they have nothing to sell, well, then we better make sure we're doing a darn good job saving very diligently along the way, right? Because they're not going to have that big liquidity event, right? That lump sum of money at the end of their journey, right? So they have to do a very good job from day one, making sure that they're saving and investing so that when they decide to, hang up the camera per se, that they have that pot of money there, or financial resources, whatever it is, those assets to provide income and the lifestyle that they want once they're done doing whatever it is that they do. So from a planning standpoint, that there's a big difference there in how we're investing and saving and accumulating assets throughout the journey.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I hear as well from folks, they're coming out of an enterprise, let's say a larger organization, and they have, they might say, well, I have a 401k,
Mm-hmm.
And this applies, I think, to freelancers and solopreneurs kind of equally, right? I mean, you're making this leap. You've decided, oh, I'm this changing my life right now. I want to go do this on my own, and who knows where it takes me. And this is a journey a lot of people are on, right? I mean, this is a really fascinating time in the world, and people are saying, what do I want to spend my time doing, and how will I do that, and where will I do that from, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm fascinated by it. And what they say is, I'm leaving my job, and I've got I have this job I've been working for a little while, or maybe just a few years, who knows, short time, and I have my 401k, and that's going to be fine, and I'm going to go and I'm going to do this work right now. Tell me a little about sort of like traditional 401k type. I say 401k, I really is like the traditional investing vehicles that are out there versus what a freelancer or a solopreneur. We've already just drawn some distinctions about how some have to save and some are putting money back into their business. But let's spin this out a little bit. I hear all kinds of stuff. I want to buy crypto. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. There's all kinds of things. I have my 401k here. That's really safe. I mean, tell me about maybe the approach you would take and sitting down with someone, and maybe give some kernels here for people who are listening to say, okay, well, how might I approach this, given that I'm not in that 9-to-5 job now?
Yeah, I love that too. I think COVID gave a lot of provided some downtime and some quiet time to a lot of people for them to like reevaluate their priorities and say, maybe this 9-to-5 thing for the rest of my life isn't really for me. And so, yeah, we've seen a ton of people making that move. And so, a lot of times, yeah, they're leaving behind a 401k, which is great, by the way. One thing I say is, hey, a 401k is great, good for you, but that's not a financial plan, right? It's funny. I just, sometimes I talk to even just friends, and I'm like, hey, is there anything I can help you with? And they're like, yeah, no, I'm good, man. I got a 401k. I'm like, awesome, but that's not it. That's not all there is to it. No, but as far as the investing vehicles go, so there's all kinds of different accounts. People may not realize that, but there's taxable accounts, there's tax advantaged accounts, right, for retirement. And really the type of account for each individual person is going to come down to their goals, right? What, you know, there's so many different variables that go into it. It's hard to break it all down, but I'll give you a kind of a practical example. So, the solopreneur might be putting most of their money back into their business, but as kind of a safety net or plan B, we are going to invest in some traditional investment vehicles, right? So maybe that's a Roth IRA if their income isn't over a certain threshold. It's, as of right now, that's $6,000 a year is what you can put into a Roth IRA. So that solopreneur might put the majority of their profits back into the business, and then enough money to max out that Roth IRA for the year, or traditional IRA, both $6,000 limits. Whereas I work with some freelancers that they're not plugging money back into the business necessarily, so they're putting a lot more money into retirement accounts. A SEP IRA is SEP. That has, we can structure it in a way to have $58,000 a year go into a SEP IRA, so a much higher limit, right? A little more nuanced and a few more rules in that type of account, but that's kind of a difference, right? The savings rate between a solopreneur and a freelancer. So that's kind of an illustration on maybe how you would choose a different account based on which one you are, and kind of what your end goals are. As far as, a common thing I'm tackling right now is what you just described is, you leave the 9 to 5 and along with that, a 401k. So now what do you do with that money? Always, 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 I recommend roll that over into an IRA for yourself. Depending what type of 401k would dictate, what type of IRA or retirement account you roll it into, but definitely do that. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, just so you don't forget about it. You might think, oh, I'll never forget about that 401k, but you would be amazed at how many people leave behind just, maybe small, maybe a few $1,000s in an account that they worked at an employer for, a year or something. But you know what? $3,000 today, you let that sit there over the course of the next 15, 20 years, you'd be surprised what you wake up to in 20 years with the compounding interest, what that could turn into. So don't lose that. So absolutely roll that into an IRA that you have control over. Typically, you're going to have more investment selections in a 401k, despite what type of account you roll it in. I'm sorry, in an IRA, despite what type it is. You're pretty limited in a 401k. And then a lot of times the fees and expenses are less in an IRA versus a 401k. So yeah, for those people who have left behind a 401k, absolutely I would recommend getting that into your possession in an individual retirement account. And then as far as, what do you invest in? That's a tough one to answer directly. It really depends on the type, the situation on the person. Crypto is obviously a very big hot topic right now. For those who are interested in it, great. I wouldn't put more than 10% of your portfolio in it for a couple of reasons. Number one, as a solopreneur or freelancer, you have, from an investing perspective, you are exposed, whether you realize it or not, to an above average amount of company specific risk, right? So a W-2 employee doesn't really have to worry about this as much. They might not want to put, that would be the equivalent of like a W-2 employee putting 80% of their portfolio into Facebook or Google or just one company, right? That's a high exposure to a specific company. So if that company were to dissolve or go bankrupt or whatever happens and it goes down, well, your portfolio value is going to tank. So that's why you want to be diversified, right? We hear that word in investing all the time. So with solopreneurs and freelancers, their investment portfolios are pretty boring, to be honest, because we take a look at their entire risk profile, right? We factor in the business that they're running. Small businesses are high risk businesses. There are businesses that are almost, you hear too big to fail, right? Like Amazon, they're probably not going away anytime soon. But us small guys and girls out there, there's a number of things that could take us out on a weekly basis, right? So we have high company specific risk. Don't forget to factor your own business in to your investments. I think that's an often overlooked piece when it comes to investing, for us, solos out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. You mentioned kind of biggest, those are such big risks for us. One of the things, also the opposite of risk, opportunity, right? Do you see, how do you view going forward opportunities in this space? You already mentioned like building this enterprise value. I kind of come from a world where there's a lot of folks out there looking to buy companies and sell companies and things like that. It never struck me as, oh, you could sell a solopreneur business, or a freelance business, but in this case, as we're using the term here today, a solopreneur business. But I guess that's really changing. I'm imagining that over the course of the next, say, 7 to 10 years or less. Maybe it is happening today. I want to hear about that. Are people acquiring these businesses? Because it seems to me like there could be a lot of opportunity. If I'm in a high risk situation and I chose this, I'd like to understand what the opportunity is as well, right? It should balance out a little bit for me.
Sure. Yeah. Risk reward.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think technology has really, this probably isn't a conversation you and I could have had 10 years ago. But with the amount of technology and the platforms that are out there today to support, and there's a growing number of them to support, solopreneurs, I think this is becoming more and more feasible, and there are just more and more opportunities every week. It seems like for us. I guess from a selling standpoint, the enterprise value standpoint, there are platforms popping up like Microacquire. Is a new company, and they are an online platform that it's a platform to provide a streamlined buying and selling process. It's a marketplace basically, to match buyers of small businesses with sellers of small businesses. The types of businesses that we're talking about, that are part of our communities. That it wouldn't really make sense to hire a merger or acquisition advisor, right? Way smaller than that. We're talking, maybe $50,000 business, right? Very, very small numbers compared to what you have traditionally seen, business brokers listing north of, 2, 3, 4 million. So the opportunities are just growing day by day as far as how do you sell your business? How do you find buyers for your business? These platforms, and really there's a lot of business brokers out there who are starting to understand that there's a lot of really attractive small businesses out there. One that comes to mind that I've gotten to know pretty well, he only buys and sells e-commerce businesses. So these are like your Amazon FBA sellers, Shopify store owners. Like that's all he does. And that wasn't a thing 5 years ago, right? So it's like all these opportunities are coming up, and it's really cool to see. Now, as far as how you capitalize on those, that's that takes some planning, right? You can't just wake up one day and say, okay, ready to sell my business. It's not as easy as that. It does take some kind of proactive, thoughtful, intentional planning on the front end. I think one mistake a lot of people make is thinking, I'll sell the business when I am ready to sell the business. That's not really how it works. You can sell the business when the business is ready to be sold. Right? There's certain things that have to be put in place, right? Do you have the right financial statements, right? Any interested, serious buyer is going to want legitimate financial statements, not a shoebox full of receipts. And just a handshake typically doesn't do it, right? They want to see numbers to back up what you're telling them, and what you're advertising. Tax planning's big. You get that lump sum of money. If the sale is successful, chances are that's going to bump you into some higher tax brackets. And you might be exposed to some tax issues that you've never had to deal with. And so it's a shame when if you were to try to sell your business there's this large gross sum of money, and then at the end of the day, what you actually get to take home and put in your pockets is significantly less because Uncle Sam took a big portion of that, right? It's like Biggie said, mo money, mo problems. Well, that applies perfectly to this situation. So, yeah, there's
You
there's
worked that
plenty of
into this
opportunities out.
podcast. That's great. That's great. We
Yeah,
want to
there's
more
plenty of
promise.
opportunities out there, and they're just growing every day. But it does take uh, some time and really intentional planning in order to truly capitalize on these opportunities that the people in our communities have available to them, which is great, right? You don't have that as a W-2 employee. Um, so yeah, there's risks, and I don't know if you want to dive into that at all, but um, there's definitely risks that need to be mitigated as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things I want to come back to that concept, and I think we could probably dive in on all kinds of stuff that might be exciting to some and maybe not to others, like taxes and things like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. I know.
yeah, but one,
I
yeah,
got
no,
to be
that's
careful.
no, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's great. I think the and that's probably could be a topic for an entire other show here. But one of the things that I'm really curious about though, because folks who are coming into this space, for the first time, or maybe they're, or, who knows, maybe they're returning and being solopreneurs or freelancers, or they're just even thinking about it. Their current W-2, they're working in an organization, like, I want to get out of here, man. I can't deal with this anymore. I'm done. I want to go do my own thing, but I just don't know, like, how I do it. What do I do? So how would you recommend someone go about even talking to a financial planner like yourself? I mean, one of the things people say to me all the time is, Phil, I can't, I don't even have enough money to talk to one of these people. Like, they're gonna want me to be like some, like I said, more money, more problems. Well, I gotta have more money first, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, how do I get that money first? So is that really the case? Or, tell me about a little about the process of how you would approach a client of yours, right? And does it really matter, how much they bring to you in terms of their own holdings, if you will, or investable assets, I guess you might call that, or does it, and then how would someone on the other side, how would you say, look, this is how you choose your financial advisor?
Yeah. So, I mean, just generally speaking, yes, some advisors, financial planners, some of them do have asset minimums, right? So it might be $250,000, $500,000, $1 million in some cases.
Mm.
For those, okay, that's easy. Cross those off the list. Now let's focus on the ones that don't have asset minimums. Um, for those who don't, and by the way, most advisors do not have asset minimums, so that leaves a vast majority of the advisors out there available. Now, from there, I guess, yeah, so that would be the first. If you don't have a lot of investable assets, which most people who are trying to take this leap don't, right?
Right.
So if you're at that point, how now where do you go? How do you narrow the field of advisors down to find the one that's best for you? Because it is a big deal, right? Not all advisors are created equal. I don't think people really realize that. Like, they understand, there's all kinds of doctors out there and specialists, right? I mean, if your heart hurts, you go to a cardiologist. If your eyes hurt, you go to an optometrist. People don't realize that advisors actually specialize in certain areas, working with certain types of different people. They just know financial advisor, right? Which isn't really the case. So the first thing is, do a quick search. Google is a great starting point. Just financial advisors for business owners. There aren't that many advisors out there focusing on the solopreneur or freelancer space, although there are some. But I would definitely do that, right? You don't want to, as a especially younger, age-wise, younger person looking to take this leap, you're probably not going to want to get paired up with an advisor who only works with retirees, right? Because that advisor is going to be dealing with totally different problems and opportunities than you are. It's just totally different types of planning. So find one that specializes in working with people like you. Um, if you're not sure where to start, I'm sure we'll put my contact info in the show notes. Feel free to reach out. I mean, I'm a friendly guy. Love helping people out. No sales pitch. I'll try to point you in the right direction if that's something you're looking for. But that's definitely my biggest tip: would find someone who works with people just like you. who are familiar with the types of problems you're dealing with, who understand the types of opportunities available to you. Um, that's really a big one. And then the second most important thing, I think, aside from the specialization aspect, is find an advisor who or a planner who can make a living without having to sell you something, whether that's investment products or insurance products. uh, Not to bad talk any different type of advisor out there, but the advisors that work at banks and wirehouses, right? So these are your household names. Think J.P. Morgan, Chase, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo. Nothing wrong with these advisors. It's just that they don't specialize in working with small entrepreneurs. So that in order to get paid, they have to sell a product of some sort, whether that's investments or insurance. On the other hand, there are advisors out there, there's fewer of them, but they're out there who charge flat planning fees. They say, hey, maybe it's a percentage of your net worth or income, right? Because you don't have assets. They're either non-existent or they're all getting put back into the business, right? So find someone who can get paid, who can give you good objective advice without having to sell you something. So again, that might be a percentage of your asset, or I'm sorry, percentage of your net worth or income, or just a flat dollar monthly kind of like subscription model, right? You pay me $200 a month, and basically I'm yours, right? Like a retainer model, essentially. So for the newer, or maybe not even yet existing solopreneur who's still at the 9 to 5, who just wants to take the leap, that is the type of advisor that I would want to work with, just to get the good, solid, objective advice, without having to worry about being sold something. Because not that products are bad, they absolutely have their place, but they're tools, right? And what these people need, that we're describing, that we're talking about here, they don't need products at this point, they need advice. So find an advisor who can get paid for advice.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So the summary there is specialize, right? Make sure they know that you're looking to do something that, you tell them what you're about to do, the freelance solopreneur sort of lifestyle approach to these things. Make sure they know about that. They're not focused on retirees or something else. Well, actually backtracking in one step first, try to find someone who does not have an investable minimum, right? An asset minimum.
Yeah,
right?
that's kind of
Right.
first base.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Make sure they don't have a minimum. Make sure they specialize, and then make sure that they don't have to sell you something because they're part of a large organization that puts pressure on them to sell you a vehicle of some sort, or a product of some sort that they have to sell. So, one of the things too, we mentioned this in a prior conversation I've had about core values, right? I mean, in terms of just approaching that, how do you think that? How do you go about dealing with your clients on those type of topics, or how have you found that, from a solopreneur or freelancer approach, is there any sort of methodology that we can use to understand the core values of the advisor that we're working with? Maybe some of the stuff we've already discussed comes to mind, maybe, I don't know, but that seems pretty important, not only to ourselves here, but I think in the community in general, the core values that people have. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
As far as trying to figure out what the values are of maybe an advisor that you're considering working with, you can ask. Sometimes you can figure out just through honest, candid conversation, what's important to them, kind of how they communicate, how they talk about different things and people. Sometimes that just rubs off, but it doesn't hurt to ask. That's definitely absolutely something I would recommend people ask. What are some of kind of your core values or guiding beliefs? I have a few that I try to keep in mind all day, every day as I go about my life. Um, you know, it's transparency. I think transparency is huge, especially in our industry that honestly hasn't been the most transparent in past history. Um, I think that's a big one. And along with that, like some of the other things that I believe in, I don't know if you necessarily consider them values per se, but kind of where you place your value. And I think for me, that's experiences over tangible things. Um, maybe that's kind of a generational thing.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well,
but
that's something to
most of
jump
my
into.
clients
Yeah.
are right there with me, right? They
Mhm.
love the transparency. The more transparent we are, the better work we do together. Um, the client and advisor relationship just works better, right? I mean, if you're a client and you're withholding things from me and not being totally transparent, I can only do so good of a job for you. I have to know a lot of stuff, right? And I think that's that's a very intimidating thing for a lot of people, is to get financially undressed, right? To get financially naked
Hmm.
and really be vulnerable with someone else. Um, but it's so important if you want to have quality work done on your behalf. So transparency is huge, and what that allows, not only good work, but it allows me to not have to sell. And I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not a great salesperson. I just enjoy doing really good work, and if I could just skip the sales part of it, um, I would. And for the most part, I do. And I think transparency really helps that. Get just tell everyone what you're about. Don't try to hide anything. Don't try to back end sell or anything like that. Just come forward with it. If people like you and they resonate with you, they'll reach out, when the time's right. And that's kind of what I believe. And then just placing value on experiences over things. And I think that's another really common, I guess, value, if you want to call it that, that I share with, my clients. That tends to be a
Yeah.
commonality.
Yeah.
I
Can you
think
jump in
not
on
just
that?
between my clients, but most solopreneurs and freelancers kind of value that the freedom, not the traditional. They prefer the alternative lifestyle, right, to the 9 to 5. Um, so it kind of goes hand in hand there.
Right. Tell me a little about that, because I think that's a huge topic for people, right? The experience over things, right?
Yeah,
So we've seen a shift in that, I think over the last maybe, well, it's really 10 years, 5 years, 3 years at COVID as well. All of a sudden said, hey, wait a minute, um, that I think has been a catalyst to that shift as well. So what, tie it together for me a little bit. First of all, what do you think about that, in terms of how it changes how we approach for what you do, for example? I saw you
yeah,
just, I think you was out, took some time off and went on some hiking with your family, right? There's some experience, right?
yeah.
How does that? This is a big topic. This is a big topic for. I want to probe that a little bit if we have a little time here on, because
Of course.
the 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 ability for a solopreneur, a freelancer, this is a really, really big topic, because what happens is you get into this, you're doing really well as a freelancer, and I've got this work coming in, let's say, but then you find out, well, wait a minute, if I don't do the work, I might not be making money, right? And so maybe I get help, maybe I don't, things like that. But how now my experiences, I don't get to have my experiences because I'm working all the time, right? I mean, is that something that, as either a financial advisor, or even forget all the financial side of things, what do you think your experience now as, because you've moved away from being in sort of big shop and coming into doing some of this work on your own? Tell me about your experience there, and the transition you had to kind of go through, and it maybe the lens of experiences through, looking at through experiences versus having things, or possessions, is a good lens to use on this sort of transition from 9 to 5 to other work. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's funny, on that hiking trip I went on that you just mentioned. I met this awesome couple. We met them out on the trail, kind of close to the parking lot. And as we were walking back, we kind of just walked back together with this couple, my wife and I. And we got to talking. They're similar ages, and come to find out, yeah, they, the husband had worked at a super large corporation, and the wife had worked as a dental hygienist. So kind of the stationary lifestyle. They had the house, they had the cars, um, the things, right? Kind of the traditional American dream, and
Mm.
good incomes. But because of COVID, they I guess they had taken some time away from work, not by choice. I think they were one of those, they're in the situation where, like, they were, pushed to stay at home and basically paid to do nothing, right? Like a lot of us were, not me, but a lot of people were really when COVID was hitting. And so what they did is they rented a camper van and they kind of hit the road for their goals for 3 weeks. And that just opened up, like, holy smokes, I can do all the work I was doing, in an office, but I can do it on the road. Not the wife, she's a dental hygienist, but she is actually the one who took the leap to leave that and start her own business. And it's just interesting. Like, I think the mobility versus stationary thing is a big deal for a lot of people. I see a ton of folks, I mean, if you drive by any like camper or RV lot, they're empty. Like, people are, I mean, I have clients that are selling their houses and buying boats and RVs and like living on the road or on in transit. Digital nomads, right? Like, that's becoming a real thing, and I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, I'm seeing a ton of that, and they're just craving experiences, and they're like, you know what, we fell in early in life to the, not necessarily, we won't call it a trap, but we fell into the 9 to 5, buy a house, have your 2 cars, with the picket fence kind of lifestyle. And I don't think the folks who have made the transition, I don't think they realized really how much, not that they were unhappy, but how much they craved kind of this more flexible lifestyle revolving around experiences, as opposed to staying in one place and having the things. And I know that's changed how I plan, how I help people plan from a financial standpoint. Because goals, right? I mean, we plan for goals. That's how we plan. That's how I plan. You tell me what's important, and I try to make it happen for you, right? That's kind of how it works. So we're not saving for big down payments anymore on a house, or for that retirement at 65. These folks are enjoying life. It's kind of more of a minimalistic lifestyle, is what I'm starting to see. They don't want more, they want less, and they just want more flexibility. That seems to be, like, if I had to put one word to describe it, seems like people want more flexibility. And so that's kind of the trend that I'm seeing, at least, and the flexibility to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want. And that seems to be really what goals are centered around, if I had to really boil it down to kind of one trend that I'm starting to see.
Do you think that trend continues? This sort of, like, my job is sort of tease out some thoughts on the future of work, right?
Yeah.
If you say no one could have predicted COVID, for example,
Right.
I mean, maybe Smith wrote there were some books written, science fiction that became reality. I guess those are some predictions in a way, but no one could have predicted that. But if we look out in the future now, as we see that sort of stop, that real quick, okay, COVID, and everybody is, like, I'll call it the big pause button. Okay, I took weeks or maybe a month or whatever it's amount of time off, and it created this whole thought process now that we're open my eyes to another thought process, maybe something like that. Like you said, maybe they weren't unhappy, but they realized, wait a minute, I'm missing out on something else over here, and I could make that a reality. Where do you think it goes? You sit here talking to people all day long about that, that continuing process, right? So flexibility, I could, see a lot of different things there. Do we think that, for example, housing market might change because of that? Smaller homes, or do you think apartment rentals might continue to be really, more popular, right? Renting space rather than owning. Because that's something that does come into the financial planning, right? You said, I'm not saving for a big down payment on a house. I don't really worry about that. I'm probably saving for a down payment on my big RV.
Yeah, right.
I got to think about, I want this stuff in my RV, and I want to be able to park it someplace and all that kind of stuff when I'm not traveling in it, exactly, right? So
Yeah.
what do you think about that in terms of, and by the way, these are questions that probably wouldn't have come up, 10 years ago.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or 5 years ago, or 3 years ago. So what do you think about the future of that? And I'll kind of wrap around a little bit. I want to be conscious of your time today. But I kind of want to wrap around a little bit on, the not just the future here, but if people are looking to leave that job, that 9 to 5, that traditional job, what would you advice would you give them here? So I got two full questions. I'll go to the first. What do you think the future looks like?
Yeah, the future, in my opinion, I think you brought up some great points that, there's some factors going on right now that are making this change that we're seeing possible, or pretty popular, right? So you have folks, right? COVID was kind of the catalyst for that, where, okay, work from home is now a much more popular concept. So without that, I don't know that we'd be seeing quite the influx of people going out on their own and taking that leap and leaving the 9 to 5. But that's a thing, and I don't think that is going away anytime soon. We're starting to see more people go back into the offices. Commercial business space is starting to get reoccupied a little bit more. But considering like the labor shortages across the country and just about every industry, I think in order for these businesses or companies to stay competitive, they're going to have to just keep allowing work from home optional if that's something that people value, which it seems to be something that a lot of people value. So I know that's kind of still the 9 to 5, but still, a little bit more remote. But no, so I think, that coupled with, this super hot housing market, real estate valuations are through the roof. So people aren't too excited right now to go out and buy. If anything, they're excited to sell, and kind of do that, more transient lifestyle for maybe a little bit, at least until the housing market cools off a little bit and they can re-enter and buy something. So yeah, I think definitely short term, we're going to see this move from 9 to 5 to freelance, solopreneur, kind of lifestyle. And then long term, yeah, it's hard to say, but with technology, when you factor that in and how technology is making it so much easier and feasible for people to go out on their own, and not just to go out, but to actually succeed, to give them a better chance of succeeding. I think we're going to continue to see this for quite a while. Which I'm excited about. I think it's great. I think we're going to see more innovation because of it too. Entrepreneurship creates innovation, and I think that's good for everyone. So I'm excited to hopefully see that come to fruition.
Long way from the apple orchard. Interesting. Yeah. Before I let you run, some of the questions we often ask people, sort of to give folks not only further insight into you as a person, but also into kind of your thinking and how you go about approaching life a little bit. Tell me a little bit about maybe some of the books you would recommend to folks who are in this sort of freelance, entrepreneurial, solopreneurial type of space. You have any favorite books that you've read of late that you'd recommend?
Oh yeah. Yep. My number one book, and I actually give a copy to every new client. That's how much I love and believe in this book. It's called The E-Myth. It's by Michael Gerber, and we can put links to the show notes to it.
Sure.
It's not a super new book. It's been around for a little while. Maybe it was 2099 when it was written. So it's not like super cutting edge, but it's just evergreen, kind of foundational stuff. And it's the one book. So the E in E-Myth stands for entrepreneurial, right? So it's the entrepreneurial myth. They just shortened it. And really what he walks you through is, how do you build a business that you can sell? It's not an exit planning book per se, but it kind of is. And it's just, how do you build a business, a valuable business, and one that can help you. What he's really preaching is not getting caught up working in the business, right? Taking some time consistently to work on the business, which is what I help clients with a lot. So after reading this book, that book definitely helped form the financial planning process that I now take clients through. Had a huge influence on that. And how to basically not become a slave to your business, how to become operationally irrelevant, or at least, have the business work for you, not you work for the business. So
I like that thought. Like, work on your business, not in your business, right?
yeah, that's an easy trap, especially for solopreneurs to
Mm,
get caught in, because we're wearing every hat there is. So make sure you take the time to but obviously when I work with clients, we have dedicated time, but even for those who maybe aren't ready to work with an advisor or whatever, a bit of advice is set a standing day every month, whether it's the third Tuesday, the fourth Friday, whatever it is. Set a standing day every month so it's consistent. Put it on your calendar into perpetuity, and give yourself a couple hours to just work on the business. Don't do anything. Don't let emails pop up. Don't let text pop up. Don't try to be brainstorming and thinking about other things. Really do your best to just find a couple things that are going to move the needle in your business and work on those.
mm, mm.
So
Very well.
that's kind of the main takeaway from that book, but it's awesome.
Mm, mm. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up the more serious part of this podcast. I do have one question to ask before I let you go. Again, to get some insight into maybe who you are and your thought process and whatnot. Here's one for you. If you were to give your Netflix login to anyone for one weekend, but the condition is that they had to watch something you pick for them, it could be anything. I guess anything available on Netflix, but you know where I'm going with this.
The one show that sucked me in and really just it's one of those that like keeps you up till 2 a.m. and not proud to admit it, but Ozark. I mean, Jason Bateman, in my opinion, crushed it. Love that show.
Yeah, yeah,
It started to get a little dark there towards the end,
yeah, a
but
little.
I mean, but like there wasn't a single moment where I wasn't like dying for more. Like just
Yeah,
keep them coming.
yeah,
Let me watch the next
yeah,
one.
yeah,
I
yeah,
love that series.
yeah. Excellent. Well, I do too. I love that series as well. So I'm not sure what it says about our psyches about with recommending that show to people, but if you're looking for a weekend of escaping, maybe that's it. As long as it doesn't get you too revved up, right? Keep you up till 2 in the
Yeah.
morning. Well, I want to thank you for joining me here today. Some of these insights are just amazing and really instrumental in helping to grow what I think is an outstanding community already that's out there in the freelance and solopreneur space. And like I said, we'll include all of your of Hunter's contact info in the show notes here. And make sure that you reach out to him with questions directly. And thanks for volunteering to do that, Hunter. I'm sure our community and the community of freelancers writ large will appreciate all of your help.
Yeah, please just know you're not going to get pitch slapped. Just reach out if you have any questions. I'll just answer them as best as possible. And at the least we'll part as friends, and I'll try to point you in the right direction. But Phil, thanks for having me. This was awesome. And hats off to you for the community that you're building. It's great. I love to see it. So
Great.
happy to play a small part in it.
Great. Well, we appreciate Hunter as always, and we'll look forward to hearing back from you maybe on a future show soon. Thanks a lot for it.
Hope so.